My name is Jason Miller. I'm 24 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb of Charleston, South Carolina. I work as a freelance photographer, which gives me the freedom to explore my surroundings, though lately, I wish I hadn't. It all started about a month ago when I found an old leather-bound journal at an estate sale. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My best friend, Alex, dragged me along because he wanted to check out some vintage furniture. As we wandered through the musty rooms of the dilapidated house, something about the journal caught my eye. Its cover was etched with strange symbols, and it looked completely out of place among the rest of the junk. The woman running the sale seemed eager to get rid of it. "Take it for free," she said with a nervous smile. "It's been in my family for generations. What? It's better gone." That should have been my first red flag, but I just thought she was being dramatic. I brought it home, eager to see what secrets it held. The first few pages were written in a spidery, almost illegible script, but one line stood out. "Bound by the devil's touch, the price is always paid." At first, I laughed it off. It sounded like something out of a bad horror movie. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized the journal was full of entries detailing strange and gruesome events. People disappearing, accidents that didn't make sense, and a recurring mention of the touch that seemed to connect them all. That night, I left the journal on my coffee table and went to bed. I didn't think much of it until I woke up at 3:15 a.m. to a loud crash in my living room. My heart pounded as I grabbed a baseball bat from under my bed and crept downstairs. The journal was lying open on the floor, its pages fluttering even though the windows were shut tight. I told myself it must have fallen off the table, but deep down, I knew that wasn't possible. I picked it up and closed it, feeling a strange warmth radiating from the cover. The next morning, things got even weirder. My neighbor, Mrs. Duval, stopped me as I was leaving for a photo shoot. She looked pale and shaken. "Did you hear it last night?" she asked. "Hear what?" I replied, confused. "That awful scream," she whispered. "It sounded like it came from your house." I hadn't heard anything, but the way she described it, like someone in unimaginable pain, made my skin crawl. Later that day, while editing photos in my home office, I glanced at the journal sitting on my desk. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it again. This time, the pages seemed different. Words that had been barely readable before were now clear as day. A new entry had appeared at the end. "He knows you now. He sees you. Run while you still can." Chills ran down my spine. I hadn't written that, and there was no way anyone else could have. I slammed the journal shut and decided I'd had enough. I'd throw it away and forget the whole thing. That night, I drove to a nearby park and tossed the journal into a dumpster. But as I walked back to my car, I felt a heavy weight settle on my chest, like I was being washed. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, and the air felt thick and suffocating. When I got home, I froze in the doorway. The journal was sitting on my coffee table, exactly where it had been before I tried to get rid of it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, staring at the journal, trying to make sense of what was happening. Around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can't escape." My hands trembled as I deleted the message. I didn't recognize the number, and when I tried calling it, the line was dead. Over the next few days, things escalated. Lights flickered, objects moved on their own, and I started seeing glimpses of a shadowy figure in the corners of my vision. Every time I turned to look, it vanished, but the feeling of being watched never went away. The breaking point came when Alex came over to check on me. He laughed at my paranoia and dismissed the journal as a harmless old book. But when he picked it up, his expression changed. This isn't right," he muttered, dropping it like it had burned him. Before I could ask what he meant, the lights in the room flickered violently, and the shadowy figure I'd been seeing materialized behind Alex. I screamed, but by the time Alex turned around, it was gone. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I knew he felt it too. The cold, oppressive presence that lingered in the room. That was the last time I saw Alex. He stopped answering my calls and texts, and when I went to his apartment, it was empty. His landlord said he packed up and left without a word. I was alone now, trapped with a journal that refused to let me go and a shadowy presence that grew stronger by the day. After Alex disappeared, I felt more alone than ever. It was like the journal had isolated me on purpose. My friends stopped reaching out, and even my parents' weekly calls became less frequent. I told myself I wasn't crazy, but the evidence piled up against me. The journal started showing me things I hadn't seen before. One morning, I woke up to find it open on my bedside table, the pages filled with vivid drawings. They were grotesque, faceless figures writhing in pain, shadowy hands reaching out to drag them into the darkness. The worst part, one of the figures looked exactly like Alex. I couldn't shake the guilt. I knew, somehow, that his disappearance was connected to the journal and to me, but I didn't know how to fix it. I spent hours scouring the internet for answers, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. Most of the results were useless. Old folklore about cursed objects, warnings about Ouija boards and demonic possessions. One forum post caught my attention. It was from a woman named Marla, who claimed to have experienced something similar. She described finding a cursed object, being haunted by shadowy figures, and losing everyone close to her. Her last post was chilling. If you're reading this, it's too late. The only way to end it is to confront him. Him. I didn't know who or what she meant, but it felt like a clue. I tried to message her, but her account was inactive. Still, her words stuck with me. That night, I decided to confront whatever was tormenting me. I sat in my living room, the journal open on the coffee table. The air felt thick, like the walls were closing in. "I'm not afraid of you," I said aloud, though my trembling hands betrayed me. "Show yourself." At first, nothing happened. Then, the lights dimmed, and the room grew unbearably cold. My breath came out in visible puffs, and the shadow I'd been seeing in the corners of my vision finally stepped into the open. It was taller than I'd imagined, its form shifting like smoke. Its face was featureless, but I could feel its gaze boring into me. My chest tightened, and I felt an overwhelming urge to run, but I forced myself to stay put. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The figure didn't speak, but the journal's pages began flipping wildly, as if caught in a storm. When they stopped, a single phrase stood out, written in bold, blood-red letters. "Your soul was promised." Promised? To whom? By whom? None of it made sense. I racked my brain for answers, but the figure took a step closer, and my thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. "I didn't promise anything," I shouted, backing away. The figure raised a shadowy hand, and suddenly, images flooded my mind, flashes of a life I didn't recognize. A man sitting at a desk, signing a document with symbols I couldn't understand. A woman crying, begging him to stop, and the journal lying open on the same desk. It wasn't me in those visions, but it felt connected to me. Was it someone from my family? A distant ancestor? The figure didn't answer my unspoken questions. Instead, it pointed to the journal, which now displayed a map. I didn't recognize the location, but something about it felt familiar, like I'd been there before. The figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving me alone with the map and a growing sense of dread. Whatever was happening wasn't going to stop until I followed the map. The next morning, I packed a bag and set out to find the place it showed. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not that there was anyone left to tell. As I drove, the landscape grew more desolate. The trees became darker, the roads emptier, and the air heavier. The map led me to an abandoned church in the middle of nowhere. Its walls were crumbling, and the stained glass windows were shattered. As I stepped inside, the temperature dropped, and the oppressive presence I'd felt at home returned, stronger than ever. The journal was in my bag, but I didn't need to open it to know what it wanted. This was the place where everything would end or begin. The abandoned church stood like a skeleton against the gray sky. Its steeple was crooked, and the wooden doors hung loosely on their hinges, creaking in the cold wind. My breath fogged the air as I stepped inside, the journal clutched tightly in my trembling hands. The interior was even worse than I imagined. Broken pews were scattered across the dusty floor, and the altar at the far end was cracked, with vines creeping up its sides. The place smelled of damp earth and decay, and every step echoed eerily in the vast, empty space. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and the air felt alive, buzzing with unseen energy. My heart pounded as I approached the altar, the journal growing heavier in my hands with each step. When I reached the front of the church, I noticed something strange. A circle was carved into the stone floor, filled with symbols similar to the ones etched into the journal's cover. The symbols pulsed faintly, like they were alive. I set the journal down in the center of the circle, unsure of what to do next. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You've come," it said, the words crawling under my skin like insects. I spun around, but no one was there. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The voice laughed, a sound so deep it made the ground vibrate. "You know who I am." I didn't, but I didn't need to. The oppressive presence that filled the church was enough to tell me that this was the source of everything. The journal, the disappearances, the shadowy figure. "What do you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The voice grew colder. "What was promised? The pact cannot be broken." "I didn't promise anything," I shouted. The journal's pages began flipping violently on their own, stopping on an entry I hadn't seen before. It showed a contract, written in the same spidery script as the rest of the journal. At the bottom was a signature I didn't recognize, but the name was clear: John Miller. My stomach dropped. John Miller was my great-great-grandfather, a man I knew little about except that he disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The voice spoke again, dripping with malice. "He made the deal. His bloodline pays the price." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That's not fair. I had nothing to do with this." "Fair?" the voice mocked. "You opened the door. You invited me in." The weight of the truth crushed me. By taking the journal, by keeping it, I'd somehow reawakened this curse. My actions had unleashed whatever this was, and now it was coming for me. Desperation clawed at my throat. "There has to be a way to stop this," I pleaded. "A way to end it." The voice laughed again, cruel and unforgiving. "There is no end. The pact is eternal." But then something strange happened. The symbols on the floor began glowing brighter, and the journal trembled where it lay. The oppressive presence seemed to falter, just for a moment. An idea formed in my mind, reckless and dangerous, but my only chance. If the journal was the key to this curse, then destroying it might break the cycle. Without thinking, I grabbed the journal and ran to the altar. There was a candelabra with one remaining lit candle, its flame weak and flickering. I shoved the journal into the flame, praying it would catch fire. At first, nothing happened. The journal seemed resistant, as if it were fighting back. The voice screamed, a sound so piercing I thought my ears would bleed. "You cannot destroy it." It roared, but I didn't stop. I held the journal in the flame until the edges of the pages began to blacken and curl. The smell of burning paper filled the air, and the oppressive presence in the church grew weaker, like it was being pulled away. The voice's screams turned to desperate whispers. "You don't know what you're doing. This won't save you." The journal finally burst into flames, the fire consuming it faster than seemed possible. As it burned, the glowing symbols on the floor faded, and the shadowy figure I'd been seeing materialized one last time. It stood at the edge of the circle, its form flickering like a dying light. "This isn't over," it hissed before vanishing into the darkness. The fire burned out, leaving nothing but ashes. The oppressive presence was gone, and for the first time in weeks, the air felt light and breathable. I stumbled out of the church, exhausted and shaken but alive. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about what the voice had said. This isn't over. Even now, weeks later, I don't feel entirely free. The nightmares haven't stopped, and sometimes, late at night, I feel the same cold presence watching me. The journal may be gone, but the curse, I'm not so sure.
Are you ready to experience the most disturbing and thrilling stories? Subscribe to Dreamcatcher Nightmares for suspenseful tales that will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, comment, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with every nightmare we bring to life.